Hello, everyone. This is Stacy. Welcome to The Landing. Welcome to The Landing. Today we're diving into an often overlooked but essential part of our coastal ecosystems, seagrass. These underwater meadows provide habitat for marine life, improve water quality, and much more. But like many natural resources in our area, we don't know how we can help. In this episode, we'll be speaking with Mr. Joel Fodrie about the importance of seagrass, the challenges it faces, and what we, you and I, can do to protect it. So whether you're a local waterman, a beachgoer, or someone who just simply wants to help, this conversation will give you practical ways to make a difference. Listen up. Hello and welcome to The Landing. We are very excited today to share something interesting with you. It's a chance for you to learn, but also to give back. So I can't wait for you to hear all about it. But before we get started, I would love for our guest to share with us his name and where he's from and all that good stuff.
Hi, I'm Joel Fodrie. I grew up in Beaufort, North Carolina. I'm now a professor at Carolina's Marine Lab, which is in Morehead City, right there by the Fisheries Community College Hospital Complex. Come from a family of teachers in the area. My dad was a teacher and a coach and a principal, taught and coached down in Atlantic, visited multiple schools. My mom was a teacher in Beaufort. Sister was a teacher and a principal in Harkers Island for a while. My grandmother was a teacher and a librarian. I'm told, and I believe it to be true, that she coined the nickname Mariner for the high school.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so she was librarian back then.
Oh, wow.
So that's me. Obviously, I've got ties to Beaufort, but also down east. I've lived in Smyrna, and I lived in Harkers Island for a little while. Mm-hmm. So back in Beaufort now.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. That's neat. So Mariner, I'm a Mariner. That's
sure. Right. We're Mariners. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Well, you're here to educate us a little bit, and as I mentioned before, to give us some opportunities to help. But the topic is seagrass, and believe it or not, that is something that I find to be one of the most beautiful things in our area. And being away and coming back home, that is something like I know I'm home when I see that seagrass. But I'm going to give it over to you, and if you will, just start wherever you think we need to start, and enlighten us a little.
All right. Well, you redirect me or ask questions.
I sure will.
So, along the coast, we have all this marsh, and everybody sort of knows the marsh. Not everybody recognizes that we have stuff underwater too. And academically, some people might call it submerged aquatic vegetation. And so what that means is there are all sorts of plants. There's algae, there's sort of true grasses, and some people I've heard call it hair locally. There's all sorts of names for it.
Yes, I've heard Granddaddy say that.
Yeah, and there's multiple species of it, and it is certainly an important part of our ecosystems, and I could, again, go on for a while.
Mm-hmm. I think it's interesting. So when I said that, I guess I'm really talking about the marsh.
You're probably mostly thinking about the marsh and that nice salty marsh smell.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes.
So today in this conversation, we're going to go underwater, or at least where the water can flood. So some of this stuff is intertidal, right? So at low tide, it sticks up above on the shoals.
Okay. The shorter things that we see.
That's right.
Okay. Yeah.
So these are plants that, millions and millions of years ago, they kind of left land and they went fully back into the water. So if you didn't know these sort of stats, like North Carolina has more of this seagrass stuff than all the other East Coast states combined except Florida.
Wow.
And Florida has a ton as well. I've heard this stat, and the people that have told me this are very believable and trustworthy. And I think the point's the same regardless. But Carteret County, here where we live, thinking about Bogue Sound, Core Sound, primarily Back Sound, we have more seagrass in this county than they have in the Chesapeake Bay at this point.
Oh my.
Right, in the bay proper. So not those outer bays that are on the Delmarva Peninsula. But in the Chesapeake Bay, they've lost a lot of their grass. And so now in this one county, we have more abundance of it than they can claim today.
And what is the reason? Why do we have more than them? Is it?
It's a mix of reasons. So again, we have multiple species. So we happen to sit at the far southern end of where you find one plant called eelgrass. And for that crowd that goes out in the water, it's I've heard it described as like fettuccine noodles. It's flat and kind of wide. We're at the northern end of where you find shoalgrass. So it's more like angel hair pasta. I think of it as like upside down pine straw. It has a similar look and feel as pine straw to me. We also have widgeon grass, which we probably get into why it's called widgeon grass later. It kind of comes and goes. It's kind of very ephemeral. And these are only, again, the true seagrasses. These are the plants that you find in high salinity waters. And when I say high salinity, I mean, near the ocean. There's a whole ecosystem of lower salinity submerged aquatic vegetation. So if you were on the mainland side, like on Pamlico County or Beaufort County, they don't have these seagrasses, but they've got other plants. Vallisneria is one scientific name, tape grass, muskgrass. All of this stuff is, structure in the water that all the animals love.
Right.
Some things eat it as a plant. A lot of times it's a home for them to live in. So this stuff that we have in North Carolina has probably persisted better because our water quality has maybe in the high salinity areas, it's stayed a little better than Chesapeake's.
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah. Now, some stats that aren't so great, that low salinity SAV that we have in the state, some estimates say the losses are about half. And these are places that locally we just don't experience that much because we have really high salinity waters here. Even in our higher salinity areas where we've got these seagrasses like eelgrass and shoalgrass and widgeon grass, we still have a lot of it. We have probably 90,000 acres, but we used to have maybe 120,000 acres.
Oh, wow.
So we are seeing some losses. It's not a heart attack, but it might be kind of a high blood pressure signal.
Right. Something's going on.
Yeah. I mean, as we know, there's a lot of pressures, a lot of people trying to live in this area, take advantage of it. We all know why we want to be here. As we develop and try to live along the coast, we're just trying to strike a balance, and we'll get around to later about some things we might be able to do to bring a little bit back and mitigate some losses. Another reason that they've lost seagrass up north is, so I would say this, our eelgrass, this plant grows all over the northern hemisphere. You can find it on the U.S. East Coast. You can find it in Europe. You can find it on the U.S. West Coast. You can find it in Asia.
Oh, wow.
Same plant.
Wow.
But it takes on very, very, very different morphologies. So here, our stuff's a foot or a foot and a half tall. Same plant in Japan can be 10 foot tall. Yeah. So it's kind of an amazing plant. Yeah. In the Atlantic Ocean, our eelgrass looks almost like the perfect average representative plant. It's about the average height, the average biomass per unit area. So structurally, it's kind of a good representation of what an eelgrass plant might look like. I've been on this kick for the last year trying to highlight that functionally, we got some really good stuff here. So if you look at the genetic diversity of eelgrass all over the Atlantic Ocean, the highest genetic diversity in the plants are here.
Oh, yeah.
And we think that's because it's the oldest place that eelgrass has existed in the Atlantic long term.
Oh, that's neat.
Yeah. So as climate, gets warmer or colder sometimes, especially with like glacial periods, a lot of places lose their grass. And so it's been this area that may have been kind of the anchor that then repopulates. the rest of the Atlantic. Our grass might be about 300,000 years old is an estimate, whereas a lot of places the grass is only 20,000 years old.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy numbers.
Yeah.
Wow.
And our grass, it tends to have very, very low burdens of what's called wasting disease. It's this little thing called a protist that can do bad things to grass. Other places maintain burdens of this wasting disease, and for whatever reason, our meadows tend to be not holding a high burden. And then if what people like me do, academics sometimes do, we do different experiments to try to figure out trophic interactions, so who eats whom and how fast things are getting eaten.
Right.
And across a lot of studies done all over the northern hemisphere in concert within this eelgrass plant, North Carolina eelgrass has like the highest amount of trophic transfer. So if we're trying to move stuff from the base of a food web up to like the red drum and the speckled trout and the flounders, there's something about our meadows which we don't fully understand, but we know that energy is like getting gobbled up and moving up the food chain really quickly, it appears to be here.
Wow.
So this is kind of special stuff. I mean, people talk about, the special aspects of where we get to live. And that seagrass stuff is a little bit out of sight because it's underwater and therefore out of mind.
Right.
But it's a very unique resource that we certainly want to think about doing all we can to conserve it. And then as we'll get around to, maybe talk about ways to try to restore in places.
I would love to talk about that. That's interesting. There's a lot that goes on under our waters that I can't even say take for granted. We don't even think about. So that's why when you agreed to come, I was excited to learn exactly what was going on. So these seagrasses, like how do they populate? You mentioned that like ours is kind of the base unit for whatever, and then it kind of spread. How does that happen? How does it transfer?
Yeah. So I'm an ecologist, but it would be good to have specialists for like the plant biology because there's so much detail. So I apologize if I get into this kind of a little askew, but we've got these three species. So eelgrass, there are beds, meadows, and these are kind of definitive bordery things that you could say, well, there's a football field of it. And,
Okay.
some of these meadows, they're perennials, so the plant kind of dies back, but then it grows back the next year. We've also got entire meadows that are annuals. So just like a terrestrial plant, they're going to flower, and you can see the flowers. They don't look flowery, but they're flowers.
Right.
And then, in fact, it's happening right now. They're bearing seeds. So if we were to go out and just run our hands through an eelgrass meadow, we'd see all sorts of seeds. And those seeds fall out. They end up in the sediments. The plant will basically die away completely come July or August. And it's those seeds that'll regenerate the meadow the next year. So that's eelgrass. Shoalgrass, in other parts of the world, it flowers and seeds. The people that I trust and know say they've never seen it flower or seed here.
Really?
So the way that it grows is vegetatively, so the under sediment, the underground stuff,
Right.
it's always running shoots, and that's how it spreads around. And then sometimes the shoalgrass chunks can break off. They get dislodged from the sediment. They'll float around, and once in a blue moon, they'll somehow end up back on the bottom, and then they'll start the process again.
That's interesting.
And then the widgeon grass, which is a very weedy species, again, it kind of pops up here and goes away and pops up there. It also seeds, and it has a strategy, I think, where it's just kind of like a weed. It's a valuable weed, but it's a weedy life history. And so if we were to go out, today, this time of year, we'd see a lot of eelgrass and probably some shoalgrass. But next year, we might see a ton of the widgeon grass.
Wow.
Yeah. So the meadows are, they're sort of in a constant state of change, both in terms of their footprint. Some are more stable than others, but some change a lot. And then the composition is going to change throughout the year because eelgrass kind of has a seasonal cycle. The shoalgrass has a seasonal cycle. And then the rupia is just kind of a chaotic, sometimes it's here, sometimes it's not.
That's interesting. So these, you mentioned about some breaking off and replanting per se, but the seeds, do they float? Birds carry them? I mean, that's how they're transported and to other areas? And
Yeah, so they don't float. These seeds are very heavy relative to the water, and that's probably some sort of life history strategy because if you're in a place where plants can grow, you don't really want to move.
you want to stay there.
You want to stay right there.
Right.
Academically, it may be like an egghead exercise, but to me, it's pretty fascinating. So every square meter, or maybe a square yard, if you want to call it a square yard, so 1 yard by 1 yard, these eelgrass plants can produce maybe 25,000 seeds.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, maybe over here it's 15, maybe here it's 22, but many thousands. Well, there's certainly not room in that 1 meter squared for that many plants. There might be room for 30 or 40 or 50
Right.
because they're each going to take up a pie plate of space once they grow.
Wow.
So trying to figure out what happens, there's kind of like an inverse pyramid. You start with 25,000 seeds at the top. Something winnows those numbers down. Birds or fish or little invertebrates or just
That are using them for nourishment.
maybe. Yeah, we'd like to know
Maybe,
more.
yeah.
Some of the seeds just aren't made perfectly. They get crushed or broken or they break apart. But somehow you winnow that number down from 25,000, let's say, or 20,000 or 15. It's a big number.
Yeah.
Down to really just 100 seeds are going to be what regenerate that meadow in that spot.
Wow.
Now, if an entire part of the reproductive plant breaks off, then all those seeds can kind of float around because the plant will float.
That's its flotation device.
That's right. And so there's another way for seeds to kind of get around. But once the seeds are released, which usually happens when the reproductive stuff is attached to the bottom. So typically they're not going anywhere.
Right.
They're just being released and they sink pretty fast. But there's plenty of times where a plant breaks free and it floats around and those seeds just drop where they drop. And they may drop in a real deep channel or they may, and then there's not enough light.
Right.
They may drop on a shoal, which is the sediment moves around too much, or they may drop in just the right place and then you get a plant.
That's neat. That is neat. Well, tell us a little bit about what's coming up, what the volunteerism and like what needs helping.
So I definitely don't like to think of myself as an alarmist. But I just, over the last 10 years, as the state has had a lot of partners to try to map seagrass a lot more intently. And a map in 2007 that was kind of statewide of the high salinity seagrasses. It had the distribution of the grass, and they remapped it in 2013. They've just remapped it, or they're just getting ready to release another update of what these maps are showing. But those maps suggest that we went from maybe over 100,000 acres to maybe down now to like 90,000 or even below.
So in about 12 years' time.
So in about a decade, there's 10,000 acres,
Yeah,
right?
wow.
And an acre is about a football field.
Right.
So imagine 10,000 football fields. North
Yeah.
Carolina has 2 million acres of estuarine water inside the Outer Banks and Inner Banks.
Right.
Maybe between the high salinity seagrasses, they make up maybe about 100,000 of those acres of the 2 million. The low salinity SAVs make up another 100,000 acres.
Right.
So in that context, the different plants that are out there underwater would make up about 10% of the estuarine area.
Right.
But, I mean, to the degree that those maps are the best data we have, it suggests that we're losing, not gaining. And the mechanisms that are driving that are complicated. We don't fully understand. We've had more storms and all that wave energy and storm energy and changes in local water quality for a while. More people out there using the water, downstream, upstream activities that end up downstream with us. I mean, we're all living here. I built a house, I cut down trees. Where does that sediment go?
Right.
All these things are possibly playing a role. But the point is the data say we're losing some of this. And there are all sorts of ways to try to restore seagrass. Most of them are very hard, expensive, and maybe don't work as well as we'd like. One way you might try to restore a meadow is to go dig up some grass from somewhere else and bring it over here and hope that everything spreads. And that seems to be a very mixed bag. And you had to damage one meadow to help another.
Hopefully help.
Hopefully, yeah.
Right. Not even guaranteed.
That's right.
Yeah.
If we were in a certain type of system, we might put all our eggs in a water clarity basket where we just figure out how we get water clarity to improve, because these plants need a certain amount of light to do the best they can. For most of our seagrasses that are near the ocean and that salty water, I think our water clarity is still pretty good. There's plenty of light making it to the bottom where we should be able to support seagrass. There may be a few local examples of where that's a problem, but generally speaking, that doesn't explain what we're seeing.
Right.
So there are places like on the west end of Harker's Island, an area that I've always called Oscar Shoal. It's the big shoal that kind of is, if you were to leave Front Street, Taylor's Creek, and head towards Harker's Island, run through the channel, you'd have to hang a right to head to Cape Lookout.
Right.
Well, that shoal is what was in between you and Harker's Island.
Okay.
That thing, when I was in college, that thing was covered in grass. And then right around 2004, 5, 6, all the grass just kind of went away. Don't know why. And I don't want to sound like I'm blaming anybody. They were developing on that part of the island.
Yep.
That northwestern corner. Yeah. And don't know, but something happened around that time.
Yeah.
Well, if you go look today, the water quality seems to be fine. Why aren't the plants back? Could it just be that they need more seeds brought in? Is that supply of seeds what's limiting getting that meadow back?
Right.
So we have these features like Oscar Shoal, and there's others. The area around Ophelia Inlet, when it kind of rolled sand back, it kind of covered up a bunch of the grass. The grass kind of went away to the north of the inlet especially. But now there are these big, shallow, sandy flats. And we just don't know, could we, spur eelgrass growth if we just provided the seeds?
Is that even an option? Is that something you're all entertaining of doing?
That's what we're really working with the museum actively through, sort of citizen participation and also some education programs. Yeah, we'd love to try to use seeds because you don't have to go dig up the actual plants. And there is this mystery of the plants are producing thousands of seeds, but they only need a couple hundred.
Right.
Now, they're doing that for some reason. The plants are investing for some reason. And it may be that it's an investment policy for a real stormy year. It may be that in a real stormy year, you got to produce that many just to keep that many. And so we're mindful that we're working under some presumption that there's like an excess of seeds because of these numbers being 20,000 produced, but only 100 needed to grow the meadow back per unit area.
Right.
But that's part of this exercise is to test if our presumptions are right. There's a presumption that maybe we can get meadows to grow if we just provide the seeds. So we'll provide the seeds, and if we can't get a meadow back, then we start saying, well, it must be something else too.
Right.
So this is both an effort to restore seagrass, but every time I do restoration, I do it in the framework of an experiment.
Right.
Right. Every time we do something like that, it's a chance to manipulate things in the field, in nature, and let it tell us like, oh, can't do that. There's something else controlling this. Or, oh, you found the thing that if you can release that limitation, now you can get whatever you want, whether it's more fish or more seagrass or higher water clarity.
Right.
So it's based upon this effort to restore meadows with seeds is based upon the fact that some other people, other places have managed it. So on that Delmarva Peninsula, on the ocean side, not the Chesapeake side, those coastal bays, kind of similar to our bays. Again, not a lot of riverine input, pretty good water quality and clarity.
Right.
Well, they lost all of their grass in the 30s. And they think it was a combination of hurricanes and this wasting disease that we talked about before.
Right.
That we tend not to see here, apparently. And so they went 80 years with no grass in a lot of these coastal bays. And most people know these coastal bays because of the horses, just kind of like we have the Assateague and Chincoteague Island horses. So, I mean, to eyeball it, a very kind of similar looking environment to what we have. They didn't have grass over bigger scales than what we're missing our grass, but they went into these areas and brought seeds. And they have had a tremendous success. I don't know that we can promise similar results because we don't know the full dynamics of our system, but they've planted over 600 acres, and I think they've grown to 6,000 acres, or maybe it's hectares. It might be 600 hectares, and they've grown to 6,000 hectares.
So it's worth a shot. I mean,
It's at least worth a shot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Now, when you lose that much as they did, why does the outfall of that?
Right.
How do we
So
tell that?
I started in this position 15 years ago, and I really wanted to work in seagrass systems. And I don't typically like work with the plants directly. I work with the fishes and crabs and the shrimps. And so we started sampling for those critters in the grass, and we've done that every month for the last 15 years. And we've done different experiments to understand if you've got one big contiguous meadow or you've got a meadow that's 100 little patches, maybe the fish like this better or that better, all sorts of versions of what type of grass do the fish use and how does that vary over different factors, salinity and whatnot.
Right.
So based on some of those data, and again, I could sort of get some of the numbers a bit wrong, but because the seagrass is a great home for little fishes and the little crabs and some of the shrimp, that seagrass is contributing probably a couple or $300 per acre every year to our fisheries. Because if you lost that grass, you would lose those critters.
Right.
Because unvegetated bottom, it's valuable too, but it doesn't support the same densities. I mean, it's like orders of magnitude.
Right.
If I pull a little net, on the sandy flats, maybe I'll catch 3 or 4 fish in a minute or two. You can do that same exercise in grass and you'll catch hundreds.
Wow.
Hundreds.
So it matters.
It seems to matter. Trying to understand the effects of losing 10,000 acres, we don't have that ability. Our studies aren't quite at that scale. But locally, it seems to be true that if you just sort of track how much biomass is in the grass, and that biomass wouldn't be there if you lost the grass, it scales to a couple $300 worth of value per year. And at the scale of North Carolina, that's like $10 million a year.
Wow.
That our fisheries are benefiting from.
Yeah.
And that's really just the commercial sector. The recreational sector is harder to calculate, but it's probably a comparable number.
Yes. Wow.
So there's that value in the grass. The grass itself probably also helps to keep the water clear. Sediments that are in the grass, they're really well locked up.
Yeah.
And when you remove the grass and the roots and all that structure, those sediments are going to move around more.
Right. That makes sense.
Yep. We live in a world where we like to keep track of carbon, where the carbon's at in the atmosphere and the water and the ground and trees. There's plenty of carbon in the grass. And so it's playing a role in what you might call biogeochemical cycling that's important for the system to function.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's doing all these things kind of for free on our behalf as a service. People might call it goods and services. And then again, where we're sitting, as I'm looking at the ducks, especially the redhead ducks.
Yes.
Anybody like myself who likes to duck hunt knows that we have the redheads come here, and in part, if they're not looking for corn, they're looking for the roots of a lot of the grasses. So the redheads, they go down and they spit out the leafy stuff you see above the sediment. And they actually eat the roots and rhizomes underneath the sediments.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, it's not a coincidence that the species that scientifically is called rupia, well, the common name for it is widgeon grass.
The widgeon.
Because guess what likes to eat it? Widgeons. Yeah. And I've seen I don't see that many brant in my life, but the few that I've seen have been eating grass, seagrass, every time I've seen them. And so there's this tight relationship between the waterfowl and all the SAVs. Black ducks that we see, we're not like the biggest area for black ducks, but they like the Cara. It's not a true seagrass, but it's an SAV that's around, kind of an algae type stuff.
Wow.
And the black ducks just love that.
Yeah.
And so again, like what is the value of having the grass here that brings in the waterfowl? So by the time you combine, fish and waterfowl, I think we pretty much all have a vested interest in making sure that we're doing right by seagrass.
I would completely agree. Now, will you tell us a little bit about why Opportunity is coming up? Because it's pretty interesting and sounds kind of fun, actually.
Yeah, so I think the weather always plays a role in how much fun people have.
Right.
But presuming decent weather, what this project does, and we have two funding sources. One of the funding sources is our state's Sea Grant office. So Sea Grant, they try to promote sustainable ecosystems and fisheries, and they have funded us to try this restoration approach. Working with the museum, we also secured some funding from what's called Restore America's Estuaries, which is also linked with the National Estuary Partnership.
Okay.
And in our region, that means APNEP, A-P-N-E-P, which is the Albemarle Pamlico National Estuarine Partnership. And so working with those two funding sources, we've got an opportunity here to try this approach where we go to healthy meadows, and in a very kind of light footprint way, we want to extract what we're thinking are these excess seeds so that local meadow can go on just fine without all of its seeds.
Right.
It needs a lot of them, but it doesn't need all of them. There's just not the space for all those seeds to grow up and be full adult plants.
Right.
So because of the seasonality of this plant, the eelgrass, those seeds are starting to be produced right now.
Okay.
Those seeds will fall off into the sediments by like June.
Okay.
Those seeds sit in the sediment from June until like October, November. And then in November, you see the little germination, the little sprouts, and the cycle starts again. Those plants start to grow through the winter. They flower and seed in the spring. The plants kind of die away in the summer. And then those seeds are what bring the plants back in November, sometimes December.
Okay.
So we're coming up on that spring period in which we've got all these ripe seeds that are about to fall off into the sediments. It's really hard to collect the seeds out of the sediments, and that would be kind of invasive. You'd have to go disturb the sediments.
Right.
But right now we have all these seagrass plants that'll have these really tall reproductive shoots that stick up a little taller than the rest. And they're a little bit of a different color. They're a little bit of a different branching pattern. They're reasonably obvious. And you can reach down and grab one of these and kind of gently break it off, and it naturally wants to break off at a certain point that doesn't disturb the rest of the plant.
Right. So you're not pulling it by
You
the
don't have to
root,
yank the whole plant.
Right.
Correct. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. You can leave what's called the vegetative stuff, the non-reproductive stuff, and you're just kind of breaking off the reproductive material.
Right. Which contains the seeds.
And it has maybe 30 seeds, maybe 180 seeds. It just varies based upon how, it's like anything else. You go look, there's patchiness out there.
Right.
So to do this at a pretty big scale, we'd like to do this at bigger scales than just, hey, here's a little 1 meter box. We'd like to try to do this at like acre scales to see, what's possible. And so we know we need on the order of a few million seeds. And to try to do this with a light footprint, it seems to be the best way is to send out people and just kind of spread out and just walk and pluck and walk and pluck and walk and pluck. It's almost like a nature hike in the seagrass.
That's pretty cool.
So, and we fill these jet sleds full of these reproductive shoots, and then they'll come back to the lab, and we've got these big holding tanks, and the seeds will just fall out in the holding tanks.
So a holding tank with water similar to where they would be?
We have really good water that comes out of Bogue Sound because of where the lab sits. And the seeds will basically be collected and organized and just held safely so nothing can get to them until October. And then we'll go out and then we'll try to put the seeds back in. And we'll put them in the places that we want to, thinking that, hey, everything here is ripe for a meadow to grow. And the example that I use most, because I have a history with it, is this Oscar Shoal on the west end of Harker's Island. But again, these big, broad flats that are north of Ophelia Inlet, there are some places in Bogue Sound. Bogue Sound lost a lot of its grass, especially the western end of Bogue Sound. And then all of a sudden, in the last few years, there's like signs of it trying to come back. So the conditions may be suitable, but our seeds getting everywhere.
Right.
And so another thing we can do is we can go out and we core in the sediments to see if there's seeds there. So we don't want to go to an area that's already getting seeds because that would be redundant.
Right.
So operationally, we would like to have people come participate during the spring when we're collecting the seeds. And we're working in pretty shallow water, knee-deep water, maybe thigh-deep, sometimes a little shallower. And we're kind of moving around so that we're not like, just hammering one place. We kind of do a little picking, do a little picking, do a little picking, then we move to the next meadow.
Right.
And so we have maps of where we think would be good donor sites. And those are all in back sound, right? So between Harker's Island and Shackleford, and then into Core Sound. We probably won't go much farther outside of that. We don't have to. We have plenty of meadows here.
Right.
And then we will take those seeds after we get help collecting them. We'll hold them. And then in the fall, when it's time to put the seeds back, we've tried different methods of like, how do you get the seeds back in the sediments?
Yeah.
We've tried just kind of like taking little cups and just kind of tossing them and hoping they sink in. There's a technique that involves a caulk gun. So you fill a caulk tube with material, and then you can inject the seeds
into the ground.
Yep, almost like like you're planting rows of corn.
Right.
We've actually worked a bit, at least for a week or so, with a company out of California that has a robot, and the robot can go down the line and try to plant.
Oh wow.
And they're not going to be in a position to run all of our planting this year or next year. They're trying to figure out how to build a mousetrap. So what we do know is that between the collecting of the seeds and then the deploying of the seeds, there really is kind of a relationship between how many hands do you have and how big of an area can you try to restore.
Right.
And so we're looking for participation, people that want to be out in nature, learn about grass, hopefully enjoy some good weather, see the fishes and the other critters that are around that time of year, really just to kind of scale up. We'd like to get about 6 million seeds, I think, in a great world. And I did the math at some point. Each seed is, I'm going to speak in scientific jargon, like a millimeter. So 25 millimeters makes an inch. So each seed is like 1 millimeter by like 1.5 millimeters.
Wow.
So they're small.
Tiny.
It's like a big black grain of sand.
Wow.
And so we need 6 million of these seeds. And if you lined up all these seeds shoulder to shoulder and laid them on a table, you're only talking about a couple of square yards.
That's
right?
insane.
Yeah, because they're so small.
Yeah.
But each one of those little itty bitty seeds can turn into a plant that, covers 10 or 15 inches in diameter and then grows up vertically. And I stole this from that John Adams documentary, but at some point he claims that he's more interested in a flower than the king's diamonds or something. And I feel the same way. Like to me, that little seed, that little seagrass seed is more interesting than a diamond at this point.
Well, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So if we have some listeners who are interested in learning more, I know that I will be including some information in the newsletters for them to see. Where do they need to go? Do they just need to look for that, or is there somewhere they can call, or what can they do?
That's going to be the best way. I'd like to think I'm easy to reach. My name's Joel Fodrie, and if you Google it, you could also type in UNC, and then there's not too many places to hide.
Yes.
They can reach out to me, anybody at the museum. We're also trying to integrate more seagrass stuff with the museums, Earth Day activities for K-12 education, their summer camps.
Yes.
Seagrass has at times been a contentious issue, and recently there was some suggestion they might limit where trawlers grow to ostensibly protect the seagrass.
Yeah.
That was like last year, and it was an awkward situation that had a rationale and probably wasn't rolled out in a great way. And DMF, I think, heard from the community, and I think appropriately had decided to maybe take a broader look at how you might try to protect seagrass.
Right.
They know they need to protect it. I hope most fishermen say you got to protect it. It's where do you identify the right stressors to combat against. And in this case, it's the other side of that coin is, can we put some back?
Yeah.
So
that'd be pretty awesome.
Yeah, and so I think that the time is right to both try the restoration, but also have more conversations about what this stuff is. What is it doing for us? What do we know about, losing this much equals this many fish or this many ducks, or what do we don't know?
Right.
And if we don't know it, should we not overpromise, or can we not ever know, or do we just need the attention to figure it out a little better?
Right.
So it's really a two-pronged project. There is the restoration. We hope we get a great result. We hope we learn, like as experimentalists. And there's also hopefully more engagement about this stuff, because marsh is important, but it's had its day in the sun.
Right.
And it will keep having its days in the sun. But there's the
Literally.
stuff, literally. There's the stuff underwater
Yeah.
that we hope people will become more aware of and appreciate. Because, the reason that Carteret County is special, there's the people and the places, but it's also, I think, in part this habitat that's just sitting there, just so slightly under the water, under our field of view.
Yeah.
That's pretty central to what we think about in terms of what the water means to us, whether we directly associate it with the grass or not.
Yeah. It's been very interesting. Thank you for sharing with us. And I will, as I mentioned, include that information that I have in the newsletter for folks to know how to get in touch with you and how to get involved. I know that pretty soon, maybe in May, is that right, that you'll have a more informational?
Yeah, we'll probably try to target late April even.
Okay.
I apologize if I didn't do a great job. But so really, I think if we get people out in the water to go with us, it'll be our boats. Okay. We'll have all the logistics worked out. It'll be show up at a ramp and hop on the boat and go for really a low tide cycle. So, it's a 4-hour effort. You can't work at high tide because it just becomes too hard to reach down and pick stuff up.
Right.
But we'll kind of have some sort of either on-site educational training thing or a webinar or both to let people know, hey, here's what it would be.
Okay.
And in the water to collect, probably like May 10th to June 10th is like prime time for trying to go harvest these seeds.
Okay.
And then we'll reconvene in late October, early November to go plant.
Awesome.
And then we'll know what we have next year in terms of did we find the right way to do it, or do we have to tinker some?
That's exciting. Well, I think it's great, and I thank you for joining us, but also thank you for all that you're doing for that unseen area that means so much, and that we do appreciate what comes from.
Absolutely.
And it's good to understand all the ins and outs. So thank you very much.
Thank y'all very much.
Thank you for joining us again to The Landing. This podcast is brought to you by the Core Sound Waterfowl Museum and Heritage Center. I am your host, Stacy Davis Basden, and today's podcast was produced by April Davidson. Tune in again next week as we continue remembering, sharing, and learning together. Until then, stay safe and be kind.